We are very excited now because we have been cleared by IBC, so that means I am the bona fide candidate for Jubilee Party for the gubernatorial position in Bomet. I extend an olive branch of peace and unity. The political battle is over. We do not hate. We do not revenge. We embrace you as our brothers and sisters. You are not our enemies. Our enemies are poverty, disease, unemployment, and corruption. This is a very serious problem. This one of alcoholism is a very serious problem. Na sana sana kwa mtu anaitwa mtu wa kale. We lose our jobs, we lose serious opportunities kwa sababu ya hii pombe. Na saa hii sasa iko ingine inaitwa sasa, I don't know, kwanza hiyo is a serious killer. Ile mnakunywa sijui kwa mapacket kidogo kidogo, nilisikia inaitwa detergent. Our people, na unasikia hata mwingine sijui aliua bibi yake kwa sababu mama alipewa sijui 10 shillings ama ilikuwa 20. Alafu akaingiza kwa loto ikapotea na hakuna, ilikuwa ya kusiaga mahindi ya chakula ya watoto. So there is a lot of stories around these things.
All right, that is the late Laboso, who was the governor of Bomet, just remembering her day from our museum this morning. We continue pace with the dailies this morning. I want just to show you also what we have in the editorial cartoons today. Looking at what Gado has drawn, we know the ongoing talks that have been happening in Naivasha, and this is what we do have in the Standard today. Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, and we can see Wanjiku is the one who's being crushed when he says it's always more dangerous when they agree on something, right? Cost of living. This is what is in the Standard today. Cost of living is going up, 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 up. The dollar is. And then we have also the shilling has been on a free fall, and this is what Ozone has drawn today, looking at the shilling on a free fall there, where we headed at 151. The banks now, most of them selling between 156 to 158, right? So if we're trading there, this is bound to adversely affect our country. And we've seen also some parastatals or some corporations like Kenya Airways also decrying the rise or the falling of a shilling as it is. So it seems, looking at this particular editorial cartoon, the president and the deputy president, they have no control on what is happening. And even the central bank have said we leave it on a free fall for it to course correct itself. What is the projection at the end of this year, Mheshimiwa?
Well, I wouldn't know. I'm not
you're not a prophet.
I'm not a prophet, but I'm worried because the reality is now coming to bite us back. Because during the elections, there was a lot of talk about, loose talk about what could be done about the economy.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of false promises that in fact by both political forces, both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, that they could fix the economy. But the reality is that in fact the economic turmoil that we had just entered since the period of COVID and then following the conflict in Europe, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the oil prices. These are the determining factors of the economic situation in which we live. And we are not an island, we are part of that global economy. We're an integral part of that global economy, and we are impacted by what happens elsewhere. And I think our politicians had not internalized that reality. And they played around with the public mind by dangling carrots, by saying, if you elect me, I'll be able to change the cost of living. I'll be able to fix the price of fuel. And the many ordinary people seems to have swollen this factor. Yes. Indeed. And now that public that had been convinced that in fact we had a leadership that could change this are now asking what next. We are suffering. What are you going to do? But the reality now is coming to haunt us, because the central governor, the governor of the central bank is the latest person to say that the situation is dire. Our shilling was overvalued. It will continue to fall. And this has sent shock waves within the business community. It is going to further destabilize our country economically, because people now are seeing that in fact there's nothing that can be done. The shilling is going to sink further and further. It's economic forces that are at play. Nobody can do anything about it. And let's see how low it falls before it can bounce back. And in fact, I can tell you, I remember I left London, Nairobi for London when I was a young person to go and work at the BBC. And on that day, I was taking the flight to London. The Kenyan shilling was exchanging at 16 to the pound, 16 shillings to the pound. And having left the country, all these years the shilling has been declining, declining. And in fact, our brothers and sisters in Tanzania and Uganda have borne the brunt, because their shilling has fallen to such a level that when you change some few dollars, it can fill the back of your boot. I was a journalist traveling in Uganda at one time. We had boxes of Ugandan shillings in the back of our car for the few dollars that we had exchanged. And in fact, in one time in Uganda, hyperinflation had reached such a crisis, is that when you entered a restaurant and you got served the meal of the day, the price went up as you were eating. They put their prices on a blackboard. And if you didn't pay in advance, you would see someone cleaning the blackboard to put in the new price as you were eating.
So the faster it is, the cheaper it will be.
Yes, it did. So normally you would go to the counter. You would go to the counter to pay for your meal before you get it on the table, not because you really wanted to do things so efficiently, to protect yourself against inflation.
It looks like the Nairobi Security Exchange sticker. Yeah, you know.
So
it's a real time. It's a real time.
I think
pricing.
we are into very hard economic times, and in fact, inflation would go up, the cost of living would go up, and it doesn't really matter what Azimio says or what Kenya Kwanza says or what they agree in a boardroom. The economic realities outside there are driven by forces beyond us. And
but are they really beyond us? Because also we see like the Kenya Roads boards as well. They've indicated that they want to raise the fuel levy by 5 shillings.
No, I mean, they are beyond us in the sense that we can intervene cosmetically. But on the whole, we need to change how we live. This country lives beyond its means. We need to cut our budgets. We need to spend what we have rather than what we do not have. We need to stop buying what we don't produce.
Thank you.
We need to produce more. This is a long-term process. It's not going to happen overnight. What I'm saying is that if we put the right policies into place, the benefits are not going to be accrued or seen immediately. This is 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Thank you. Right. Let's hear from Professor Kabwanja.
Yeah, somebody was already complaining that I'm not speaking.
Who?
No, just a message. I'm telling him I was cooling off.
Your voice is muffled.
Yes. No, it's true. I agree with what Mheshimiwa Hassan is saying in regard to the situation. Yes, there is a dire situation out there, Ukraine, and we forget that we are coming from multiple crises. We said this before, that we started off with the 2017 double election, which sucked into our economy. Immediately thereafter, we had the Rockcast invasion. Immediately thereafter, we had COVID-19. Before we said, Jack, Ukraine is here. And all that happening within the broader context of the longest drought we have had in the region. For all those years we're talking about locusts and all, we are also talking about a drought. And it is not yet over. We thought it would be over with El Nino. but somebody told us it's not coming. So here we are. I think the situation is, I don't agree with the idea that we are helpless because the situation out there is the way it is. The truth of the matter is that our elite, the power elite, as it were, are focusing on the rats escaping from their burning huts. They are not concerning with the fire. It's the rat that they are chasing. I think they have had a lot of problems with rats before. They forget their hearts are burning. Now, because if we concentrated on what we needed to do, by now we'll be having a white paper on post-COVID recovery, spelling out very specific positions on what we need to do. And among the things that we need to do is to cut on cost. I don't see why our members of parliament, and I have this evidence, and MCAs and others should be going to hold their consultation in Dubai at this hour. This is the time to hold our meetings in Nairobi, not even in Mombasa, if we can. But in Kenya we can. But now to hear that as a committee or whatever is going to Dubai to hold a meeting because it is a very confidential meeting, who said Dubai is the most confidential place? And by the time you come back, we've spent 100 million, Kenya shillings. Now, there is no evidence, and I need to be convinced otherwise, that the government is cutting down on its own spending, even in terms of salaries. The creation of jobs, new jobs, that it takes the court and the civil society, including my friend Omutata, to ensure that the country is basically on a shoestring budget, because that's what we are in. So cutting spending is important. Second, we do know for sure that our economy has been based on imports. We import nearly everything, from the tile that we put in our house, to the basin where we wash our hands, to the sufuria that we use to cook, to the cup that we use for our tea. We are not manufacturing anything. I know they have a number of factories have come from China and Turkey and other places, India, that are doing this. And that is why the dollar is hitting us so hard, because we like things out. So we go to the hospitals in India, we take our kids to United Kingdom to study, we like going shopping in Dubai, and we like traveling to visit relatives in the United States and elsewhere. And all that requires us to be liquid in terms of dollar, which we are not. Therefore, it requires us to have a complete change of the way our economy is.
Right.
If we don't, I think recovery will be such a difficult thing.
Right. Let's hear from Dr. Kanejo briefly, if you have any sentiments.
Yes, going with what Mheshimiwa said, why would we telegraph, announce to the rest of the world that actually what we were selling you as gold is in fact iron?
Is overvalued.
Like why would we do that? Of course, then everybody's going to start running away. Then there will be no confidence in the business you're doing. It's basic economics. Number two, I do agree with Prof on one area there. Generally, when the shilling or when your currency is not overvalued or is falling a little bit, if you're producing things, it tends to promote export. Because then it makes your products cheaper as a country. Unfortunately, we're not producing enough to sell. We are consuming, we're buying. Third, basic principle is when you find yourself in a hole that is deep, the first action is you have to stop digging the hole. And how are we as a country, have we stopped digging the hole? As I just mentioned, there is no evidence that we've stopped digging the hole. Now, that compounded with the fact that we just announced to the rest of the world that we're actually selling you trash instead of gold that we're claiming to be selling you, it does not really enable the sentiment. Fourthly, March and I think around June were the highest months in terms to the price of crude, around maybe of 130, per barrel. Right now, it's hovering around 80. In the US, a gallon was going for around $4. Right now, it's $3.25 as a result. Okay. Of course, with us, that has not been the case. What exactly is happening? Are they the oil marketers, cutting costs or rather cutting corners with us, or what is exactly is happening? Because the rest of the world, because of the drop in crude, it's been followed by the drop, back home domestically. So what exactly is doing? And finally, another area where I think I'll concur with Prof is in the wake of this poly crisis that we've been going through and we're facing. We can't change the world, but we can work around to fit into that system. Have we put our minds together and say, what are our critical national interests in the light of this? What are our vulnerabilities? What could be our strengths? How can we exploit them? Instead of waking up and, just reacting to what is happening, are we really serious about solving our problems? Because I do agree when it comes to foreign policy, we're going to need some ideas on how to deal with each part of those foreign policy issues, whether it's regionally, where, for instance, right now we're leading the quartet, in IGAT in Sudan, and we've deployed, of course, in the Congo, we need to help them sort out issues, or internationally, where we're being pulled, by a number of competing forces. How are we going to be able to exploit this environment to ensure we succeed? And I think unless and until we sit down as a country, and say we're going to be serious about this, it's going to be very, very challenging to operate in chaos and with especially chaotic approach in a number of areas. It's not just at national level, even at the county level.
Right.
Yeah, Deepal, for me, what really worries me is what does all this mean, what my colleagues are saying, the spiraling cost of living, the expensive life, not just in urban Kenya, but also in the countries. What does that mean to our social environments in terms of insecurity, in terms of drugs and substance abuse, in terms of getting into behaviors that are far removed from the dictates of societal morality, particularly among our young people? Have we thought about that? I like the idea that all this is beyond us because we have a worldwide economic crisis because of a very shaky international system contributed by the challenges caused by Russia-Ukraine war, the crisis in the Middle East now. But truly, is all this beyond us? Dibal, I don't think so. With the deepest respect with what Mheshimiwa said, this is not beyond us. There are certain things that we need to do, even in a small way, to really alleviate the suffering, particularly of everyday Kenyans. Look at the cost of doing business in our midst. Isn't there something that we can do? Either as a government, both at the national and county levels. Look at the way we are playing around with taxes. Isn't there something we can do? We can't say there are things that need to wait. We are law-abiding citizens in Kenya, and we are ready to pay every penny that we owe, because this is how countries develop. Can't we then agree that these taxes can be staggered, over a period of time? Within a very short time, less than a year, we have had an increase in pay. We have had an increase in NHIF. We have had a new tax called housing levy. We are having now a new one, the 2.7 coming in. Are we not able to stagger this in a way that will actually help the ordinary person, The working class now, it's not even there, So I think there is something that we can do if we had a honest conversation as a country, as leaders, as politicians, and those of us who are leaders from other sectors, agree that let's stagger certain things. Let's create a conducive environment for investors. I was looking at some statistics, and I realized that we are not among the very best of environments for investment in the region at the moment. And a few investors are actually relocating, a few to Rwanda, others to Tanzania. That means jobs lost. And jobs lost at the lower stratas of society. If you go to Kenyan countryside now, our villages have become insecure because the ordinary, everyday small people have left our cities.
Thank you.
Back to the villages.
Thank you. Back to the villages. All right, so I just wanted to also update you regarding the Haiti status right now of police, where we know that the court has extended order barring deployment of 1,000 police officers to Haiti. Remember, that was challenged. The courts are looking just at the daily. The High Court has extended orders blocking the government from deploying police officers to Haiti, pending the determination of a petition filed by Third Way Alliance party leader Ekuru Aukot. Justice Chacha Waiters yesterday directed the matter to be heard on November the 9th. And Dr. Aukot moved to court and obtained temporary orders blocking the deployment of 1,000 police officers to the Caribbean island nation, arguing that Kenya's bid to lead the United Nations approved force into Haiti amount to gross violation of the Constitution. Of course, you can't see the minute details there. I'm just reading for you. But also, we had Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o taking special umbrage with this development as well. And here's what he had to say.
Current government in Kenya is really incredible. For instance, a good example, they have agreed to take 1,000 policemen to go to Haiti.
Yes, that's right.
Now, if you know any history, anybody who knows the history of Haiti, any black person, will not do that. Right? I feel teary, and such. I just couldn't believe how Kenya is doing this, right? Yeah. I mean, people know there's something wrong in the mind of such a leader.
Saudi Arabia says it will use Kenya as a platform to broaden its forays into Africa. Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, said Kenya is a pillar of stability and growth in Africa. The Crown Prince, in a meeting with President William Ruto, said Saudi Arabia will push for more investments in Kenya. The two leaders said at the King Abdul Aziz International Conference Center, where they held talks. In his remarks, President Ruto said Africa has made progress in economic growth, regional cooperation, and democratization. However, he regretted that insecurity, violence, and terrorism risk slugging the advancements.
We need to find a solution that respects human sanctity of human life. And I think the sooner we get to a table and discuss these issues, we can never get a solution through the power or the barrel of the gun. I think we need to resolve these issues because it's hurting us. It is hurting those of us in the global south. And the one thing I would want to say that the globe must listen to us is it is not possible anymore to do something at the corner and expect that it doesn't affect other parts of the world. Just the same way We have a huge demographic dividend in Africa. We have big population of young people, learned, creative, innovative. Unless we have inclusive growth, either we invest in exploiting renewable assets that are in abundance in our continent.
All right, we want just to follow up also on the latest development that we are having. Those were sentiments of the president regarding the warring factions in Israel, and also religious leaders from the Muslim community are calling on human rights organizations to intervene in the ongoing war between Israel and the Hamas group in Gaza. Speaking in Eldoret during Maulidi celebrations, the leaders said it was heartbreaking to see many people die. Miriam Angel has more.
As the Muslim leaders celebrated Maulidi, a day meant to observe the birthday of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, the leaders also took time to weigh in on the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza.
Umoja wa Mataifa wako na vitengo vingi, umoja wao ni utengo wa haki za binadamu. Lakini tunasikitika kwa Umoja wa Mataifa kila wanapozungumzia haki, ikiwa ni watoto wa Palestina na wanawake wanaumia hawataji. Kwa hiyo si shida.
Tunachotoa ujumbe wetu katika Maulidi ya leo, tunataka dunia ikae chini isuluhishe swala hili. Lao haitosuluhisha, basi dunia mzima itachafuka.
Over the weekend, Gaza witnessed the most violent attacks by Israeli forces, killing more than 400 people, mostly women and children, in 24 hours. Israeli forces said they attacked more than 320 military targets overnight. Gaza's healthcare system continues to suffer, with strikes hitting various hospitals.
Wamama wanauawa, watoto wanakufa, wazee wanaumia, na ili hali dunia imenyamaza, na kuna mashirika makubwa duniani ya kutetea haki za kibinadamu, lakini hili naona limefungiwa macho.
Ni vita baina ya Waislamu na soko Waislamu. Ile ni vita baina ya Wapalestina na serikali ya Israeli, ambayo inawafanyia dhulma wa Palestina katika sehemu zao wanazoishi. Na la kushangaza ni kwamba wanapojitetea kutaka haki zao, wengine wanawaita kwamba wale ni magaidi.
The chairman of the Muslim Professional League Africa, Omar Hassan Kinywa, also called out same-sex marriage, asking the government to take a firm stand against it.
Tunaona wanasukuma sana mambo ya LGBTQI. Kwa sababu sasa ni kama wanalazimisha ulimwengu mzima uingie katika ushoga na usagaji. Na hii ni tabia ambayo kwamba haikubaliki katika dini yote, haikubaliki katika mila za Afrika. Watu wengi wamekufa shakaola, zaidi ya watu 1000 kulingana na wanavyosema wengi. Hii mambo ya kusema watu 300 400, hii ni media tu, PR. Watu wengi wamekufa pale. Tunaomba wale watu wa Senate wanaofuatilia mambo haya, mawaziri wanaofuatilia mambo haya, tunaomba tafadhali mjue walikufa ni wa Kenya, msifiche lolote.
During their address, they asked the government to take action against the estranged Pastor Paul Mackenzie and those involved in the Shakahola massacre, stating that Paul Mackenzie's deed should not go unpunished. Miriam Angel, KTN News.
Now, Rwanda has sent humanitarian aid to Gaza, displaying solidarity with the Palestinian civilians hurt in the war between Israeli and the militant group Hamas. A Rwandan air cargo plane carrying 16 tons of medicine, food and water touched down in Jordan en route to Gaza on Friday. The assistance is expected to reach Gaza through Egypt due to an Israeli blockade preventing direct aid deliveries directly from Jordan. The death toll in Gaza has risen to 4,137 following an Israeli rocket bombardment on Gaza. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, while the UN says the humanitarian situation has reached catastrophic levels when Hamas, the militant group that governs Gaza Strip, attacked Israel on October the 7th and killed 1,400 people, including children and women, Rwanda condemned the attack and sent condolences to Israel on Friday. Rwanda's State Minister for Regional Cooperation, James Kabarebe, met with Israeli ambassador Einat Weiss to discuss further strengthening of cooperation between the two countries. An elderly Israeli hostage who was released by Hamas overnight said she has been beaten by militants when she was abducted and taken to Gaza on October the 7th, but was then treated well during her 2-week captivity in the Palestinian enclave. Yocheved Lifshitz, who was 85, was one of 2 elderly women freed late on Monday, leaving around 220 hostages still in the hands of Hamas, including both of their husbands.
It's okay, let's go. It's okay? Let's go. Yes. Okay. You go with this one.
My mom is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her head on another side. That she was taken through the plowed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her. And that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks. When she first arrived, they told them that they are Muslims and they're not going to hurt them. And that they ate the same food that the Hamas was eating. My mom is saying that they treat them kindly and provided for them. My mom is back from Gaza. She's a wonderful woman, and we are so delighted to have her. She is a ray of light in our life, in a big darkness. This is wonderful. But our hearts is with the over 200 hostages still there. We are heartened to hear that they are well looked after. We do not know that that is everyone, because there's many that my mom did not meet. Our heart is with our friends and brothers and mothers and sisters that are still waiting, like us, to our dad and to their children.
And French President Emmanuel Macron has proposed that an international coalition fighting against Islamic State in Iraq and Syria be widened to include the fight against the Palestinian militant group Hamas in Gaza. Macron gave no detail on how the US-led coalition of dozens of countries, of which Israel is not a member, could be involved in speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. Macron stressed that France and Israel shared terrorism as their common enemy.
I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, not just for your time, but because I'm lucid about the fact that this fight against terrorism is obviously a matter of existence for Israel, but it's a matter of existence for all of us. This is why we discussed together, and I just reminded this issue, but I consider that this is an international coalition in order to fight against these terrorist groups that we have to build. I just reminded my people in my language what we discussed about fight against terrorism, humanitarian action, rules to be respected, but as well political process. And obviously I warned against any escalation, and I want Hezbollah and some other regimes not to be part of what's happening. We had a very precise discussion, and I want to thank you for that. Now we will follow up this discussion in the coming hours in order to see what we can improve in the coming days, but I'm sure in the coming weeks and months.
The test for the West and for civilization is Hamas. If Hamas emerges victorious, we will all lose. Europe will be endangered. Everyone will be endangered. Civilization will be endangered. So if Hamas wins, if Hamas loses and is defeated, then the forces of civilization win. That is why this battle is not merely our own. It's Europe's battle. It's America's battle. It's civilization's battle. It's the battle for the heart and soul and the future of the Middle East and the Arab world. I think many understand that, but there's no going around the fact that we must have a decisive victory against Hamas. If Hezbollah makes the mistake of joining this war in a significant way, it will regret it. They will long for the second Lebanon war, which they regretted. Because they're embedding themselves like Hamas in the civilian population in Lebanon, we will have to take action against them. And the devastation against Hezbollah will be unimaginable. So I hope they heed your warning, our warning, the warning of the United States not to do so. But if they will, they'll suffer horrible consequences. We have to join together and win. The forces of civilization, progress, have to win. That goes through the defeat of Hamas. I thank you, Emmanuel, for everything you said, and thank you for coming here and standing with us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Palestinian civilians must be protected during a speech to the UN Security Council on Tuesday. Speaking at the UN headquarters in New York, Blinken said, quote-unquote, a civilian is a civilian is a civilian. He accused Hamas of using Palestinians as human shells and said Israel must take precautions to minimize civilian casualties. He also called on the international community to send humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Palestinian civilians are not to blame for the carnage committed by Hamas. Palestinian civilians must be protected. That means Hamas must cease using them as human shields. It's hard to think of an act of greater cynicism. It means Israel must take all possible precautions to avoid harm to civilians. It means food, water, medicine, and other essential humanitarian assistance must be able to flow into Gaza and to the people who need them. It means civilians must be able to get out of harm's way. It means humanitarian pauses must be considered for these purposes. We call on all countries, particularly those with the greatest capacity to give, to join us in meeting the UN's appeal for the humanitarian situation in Gaza. At the heart of our efforts to save innocent lives in this conflict, and in every conflict for that matter, is our core belief that every civilian life is equally valuable. There is no hierarchy when it comes to protecting civilian lives. A civilian is a civilian is a civilian, no matter his or her nationality, ethnicity, age, gender, faith. That's why America mourns the loss of every single innocent life in this crisis.
And the UN Security Council is meeting at the UN headquarters. Of course, that was earlier in New York for what was scheduled quarterly briefing on the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now given greater urgency by the Hamas attacks of October 7th and the deepening humanitarian crisis as the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues, the UN chief said the situation is, quote-unquote, growing more dire by the hour, repeating his call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Listen in.
The protection of civilians is paramount in any armed conflict. Protecting civilians can never mean using them as human shields. Protecting civilians does not mean ordering more than 1 million people to evacuate to the south, where there is no shelter, no food, no water, no medicine, and no fuel, and then continuing to bomb the south itself. I am deeply concerned about the clear violations of international humanitarian law that we are witnessing in Gaza. Let me be clear, no party to an armed conflict is above international humanitarian law. Excellencies, thankfully some humanitarian relief is finally getting into Gaza, but it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need. In addition, our UN fuel supplies in Gaza will run out in a matter of days, and that would be another disaster. Without fuel, aid cannot be delivered, hospitals will not have power, and drinking water cannot be purified or even pumped. The people of Gaza need continuous aid delivery at a level that corresponds to the enormous needs. And that aid must be delivered without restrictions. I salute our UN colleagues and humanitarian partners in Gaza working under hazardous conditions and risking their lives to provide aid to those in need. They are an inspiration. to ease epic suffering, make the delivery of aid easier and safer, and facilitate the release of hostages, I reiterate my appeal for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Excellencies, even in this moment of grave and immediate danger, we cannot lose sight of the only realistic foundation for a true peace and stability, a two-state solution. Israelis must see their legitimate needs for security materialized, and Palestinians must see their legitimate aspirations for an independent state realized in line with the United Nations resolution, international laws, and previous agreements.
All right, that's a particular statement by the UN Secretary General has also raised or ruffled the feathers of Ambassador. That is Ambassador Gillan Eden. There's a call for him to resign. Just maybe I didn't run it by the whole statement he said. And he says that UN Secretary General who shows understanding for the campaign of mass murder of children, women and the elderly is not fit to lead the UN. I call on him to resign immediately. There is no justification or point in talking to those who show compassion for the most. And also just looking at Fox here as well, what the Fox News says that Ambassador Gillan Eden described Guterres' remarks as shocking for stating that the October 7 terror attacks on Israel by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. You missed that. I think my editor just missed it. And that the Palestinian people have been subject to 56 years of a suffocating occupation. I read it by you, the shocking speech by UN Secretary General, Security Council, at the Security Council meeting while rockets are being fired at all Israel proved conclusively, beyond any doubt, that the Secretary General is completely disconnected from the reality in our region and that he views the massacre committed by Nazi Hamas terrorists in a distorted and immoral manner. His statement that the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum expressed an understanding, he says, for terrorism and murder. It's really unfathomable. It's really sad. It's truly sad that the head of an organization that arose after the Holocaust holds such horrible views, a tragedy. This is what he continued to tweet there. We want just to buckle down on the latest development as well, and I will also prime you on what Biden also was holding court with the Saudi Crown Prince regarding this. Is this war also because of the stability that is actually being proffered between the US and Saudi Arabia for the Middle East? Let's just begin with you, Mheshimiwa. You wanted to comment?
Yeah, Dabala, I just wanted to say that you have shown all these perspectives from a very narrow prism. You have shown us Netanyahu, who is a warmonger, who is threatening to obliterate Lebanon on public television. You have shown us the US Secretary of State who is shedding crocodile tears when American planes are sending weapons to pound the Palestinian people. And there isn't a single image on KTN showing the suffering and the pounding of the Palestinians, not a single image of the destruction in Gaza, not a single image in the children and women who are stuck in the rubble of the buildings that have been destroyed by the Israeli army. 5,795 Palestinians have been killed since the 7th of October. 2,360 are children. 1,293 are women. 18,000 have been injured. They have paralyzing injuries. And several thousand people are missing under those rubble. The Palestinians do not have even the equipment to lift that rubble to save the people who are still alive. No country has offered any assistance. The big countries that have the technology have not come up. Hospitals have been hit. Mosques, churches have been hit. There isn't a single place left untouched. And what we have here is the siege. Palestinians are now under siege. They don't have water, they don't have electricity, they don't have fuel, they don't have medicines, and people are in desperate state. What the Secretary General in his right position, and in fact I do support the the call of the Secretary General. The only insane mind that I've seen on the videos that you have played here, the clips you played, is the Secretary General calling for ceasefire, for humanitarian assistance to go through to help these people. Are the Palestinian people not human beings? Are their lives not valued? We need to really come to terms with the fact that these people are under siege in a terrible state. And I think we've also seen a big shift in global public opinion. There are demonstrations happening all over the world against this terrible war which is happening in Gaza, which is focused on civilians. Where is Hamas? How many thousands are Hamas? There are 2.3 million people who are stuck in this concentration camp, who have nowhere to go. The borders are closed. The airspace is closed. The sea is closed. And what we can hear from the warmongers is that we are going to show them what the civilizing world can do, which is the same colonial mentality we had from the British, the French, when we were colonized. That if you had an uprising, the civilian must, the African colonized must be beaten up or killed. We had the Mau Mau in our own country, where thousands of our own people were killed and maimed. So we really must be awake to the fact that things are not going very well. There is a serious violation of human rights. There are crimes against humanity and war crimes that have been committed. And Israel has violated international law several times, as the Secretary General has said. He's been very measured in his presentations. And here you are, you're presenting right-wing views, extremely right-wing views, people on the fringe saying the Secretary General must resign because he had upheld the values of the United Nations. He's upheld humanity by pointing out who the aggressor here is and who needs to be helped and assisted. And then finally, of course it is true that this conflict did not start with the 7th of October. It has been happening for 75 years. This is a community that has been dispossessed, has lost almost its land, has been pushed into a corner. And the solution to this thing, as many of our leaders have said, and I want to compliment our former Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition for speaking out on this issue. The solution to this is recognizing the right of the Palestinians, the rights to self-determination, the right of existence, the end of the occupation, and the creation of a Palestinian state that can live in peace and harmony with the state of Israel and the people of Israel. But there cannot be peace in the Middle East without the rights of the Palestinians recognized and accepted by the rest of the world.
All right. Okay. I'll respond to you. Let me just hear from Dr. Kanenja.
I think Mheshimiwa has really, put it, the right way. But a lot of times whenever it comes to the discussion over the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the rest of the world has been fed on some Kool-Aid that maybe it's a religious, issue. I think it's important for Kenyans who are watching to understand that close to 30% of Palestinians are actually Christians. And they've been there since time immemorial. Only about 2% of Israelis to 3% are Christians. And about 20% of them, the Arabs, the citizens of Israel. Now, there was an editorial, I think yesterday in New York Times, that said the way the war is now exposing the hypocrisy and double standards, and especially as seen from the global south. Now, I interact with a lot of my American and Western friends, and I've done many interviews, especially over Africa's own ambivalence with regard to the conflict in Ukraine. And these are the kind of things I mentioned so many times. Because when it comes to the rights, especially of those people who are black and brown, it almost like it doesn't exactly matter. Now, America is a great country and is a very good ally to Kenya. And of course, we have friends, many of us have been educated there. But in this conflict, still the United States has vetoed almost every single resolution that has ever come close to even condemning Israeli violations of Palestinian land. When I was doing my thesis in the United States, I made a comparative analysis of non-violence between the apartheid South Africa and the occupied territories of Palestine. And at the time, I ran into lots of trouble because it wasn't exactly popular to almost equate what was happening in occupied territories and apartheid South Africa. But I had done enough research, and even though my committee members were actually Jewish, eventually they came to agree. And a few years later, Jimmy Carter wrote a book called Peace, Not Apartheid. Because what has been happening is apartheid. I was watching, since I was away, the interview, I think was it last week or 2 weeks ago, by the Israeli ambassador who was in the studios, I think on Spice. And he was asked a question with regard to the settlement expansion. What people don't need to understand is right now you can't even create a viable Palestinian state. The parts that are remained, they are too tiny and not contiguous enough to actually create anything viable. They have no control over water, electricity, or anything. You can't have a Palestinian state the way things are designed. Now, does that justify the actions? Absolutely not. And as a country that has suffered from terrorist attack and is still at the risk of terror attack, we don't support those things. But yes, everything happens within context. There is a reason why, even as a country, we are trying to help our brothers across to improve conditions that will not create the environment, for instance, Al-Shabaab ideology to thrive. Now, today, as we speak, and this is important because in 2019, we got attacked by Al-Shabaab in a serious way. That doesn't mean Al-Shabaab has not tried to attack us again. And our security services have been doing an incredible job. But what reasons did they offer? If anyone remembers. Al-Shabaab said the reason they attacked us in 2019 was because we appeared during the opening of the US Embassy in Jerusalem. Because we were represented there. Of course, that goes completely against our foreign policy, because ours is either African Union position or UN General Assembly resolutions. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because how we even approach these matters within the environment in which we're living in. We don't want to bring harm to ourselves and put our men and women even in more harm wherever they are. Because some of us are working so hard, and I can tell you for free, what is happening today, it makes our work, especially in fighting terrorism and violent extremism, extremely difficult. It takes away some of the credibility we've worked so hard to build, depending on the positions we're going to take and how we're going to respond to this conflict. It's not about blackmail, but to the extent that the world becomes blind, and especially the most powerful becomes blind to the suffering of one group. In 2 weeks, more than 5,000 Palestinians have been killed. In a whole year, only about 13,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed in that massive war. And look at the level of noise. And that is why a lot of people are complaining. Gaza Strip is about half the size of Nairobi, one of the most densely populated places on planet Earth. The bombs dropped in 2 weeks are more than the total number of bombs, and you can go and verify that were dropped in Afghanistan at the height of NATO influence, 200,000 troops. Afghanistan is slightly bigger than Kenya. Think about that, in a little tiny place. And so there is no moral equivalent or trying to take, for instance, what is happening in Ukraine. These are helpless, defenseless civilians. And with the oncoming, of course, ground invasion, expected, it's not going to get bloody. But one thing that I would like to urge, especially our commentators as well as our media, because we take images a lot of times from one side. And even the person who was shown there was an Israeli, female who was talking about the mother having been returned. Okay, nothing was shown about the other side. And so we also have to be conscious of this. Doesn't mean we support violence. Kenya, we have seen enough attack against us. But as a country and as a leader in this region, and because Kenya is a country that's respected, how we also act and react to this actually does matter. And we need to inform our citizens so we don't live in some silos or in ignorance. And so, I think going forward, one of the debate in the world has been the emerging powers as well as the new Cold War. And this new Cold War, and I can share this for free with a lot of my Western friends because we interact on a daily basis, that these are the kind of things, for instance, the collective West is losing influence in much of the global South. And unless that dynamic is changed and we move seriously towards ensuring that there's a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, right now only 2 powers in the world have come out publicly to say that, and that is Moscow and China. The rest, we are with you, we are in lockstep with you, and that is going, I think, to hurt the influence, not just today, but the vaccine apartheid that came from COVID, the conflict in Ukraine, and this current war. And my argument has been, while in many aspects it has united the West amongst themselves, especially the Transatlantic Alliance, it's also increasingly isolating the West from the rest, and they need a paradigm shift if we actually have to maintain the kind of world we want.
Right. But just a quick information.
Just a moment. Can I just take a short break? My music is up. We'll circle back with that information and also hear from Professor Peter Kagwanja and also Dr. Ken Ombogi on this as well. There has been a rallying call from some of the sentiments that also have been spewed as well. From the river to the sea, it's a call to arms from it has been a rallying call of the Palestinians as well. And many people will decipher this as a hate speech. If you may just read through through the nuances that is being spewed there. And the fact that right now we know as well that everyone is taking sides. You say it's not a religious undertones that is being spewed with this particular war, but many people will ask a question about the Operation Al-Aqsa, right? Where is Al-Aqsa? If it's not really with the undertones of religion underneath. Why then are we fighting? Is it the territory just because of the Palestinians, or there is a sentimental, symbolic value to Jerusalem and where Al-Aqsa Mosque is as well? We take a short break. When we circle back, of course, we delve deeper on this as well. The Economist is asking when or where will this end, and that is what everyone is calling out for, to know where will it end. We've seen the Prime Minister there of Israel also warning Hezbollah on this as well. Will it take a multi-front Middle East war? Right. We shall hear from also what President Biden and Saudi Crown Prince have to say around this as well. We'll take a short break.